Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a November 15th, Tuesday edition of the MSP Initiative Live. Back from a ton of events in Florida last week. And it was quite the busy time. I don't think Oli, you ventured into Florida land, but
I was supposed to be there. I was going to fly out on Wednesday, but they shut the airport down before I could depart from John Wayne Airport.
that airport shutdown was interesting, right? Like I think I don't some of the Florida people that will be on the line, I think they said that I think a little more than a month ago they had that other kind of hurricane come through Florida, and I guess they didn't shut it down, and then there were problems, and so I guess maybe just gun shy reaction, right? Proactively getting ahead of it this go around. But yeah, I mean, that was definitely in the center of things, right? The weather in the middle of last week. And there were three major-ish events last week. I think there was the Acronis event in Miami, and that was before the storm hit mainland. And then, I think there was which distributor was running Ingram. I think there was an Ingram event somewhere in Florida. And then obviously IT Nation, the big one that we see at the end of the year. So like that was smack dab in the middle of the whole story. But real quick, let me get some housekeeping out of the way, guys. MSPinitiative.com. This and every other session that we've ever done will be there under sessions. We did complete our final community block party of the year last week in Orlando, luckily. So very happy for everyone that kind of braved the elements and joined us. We will be sending out a big thank you email with all the pictures and videos and, all the stuff there with the All-American Rejects. And I thought that was, if you were there, that was really awesome. You usually don't get to see that type of closeness, right, these days with a major name. And then last thing is we have one more Channel Strong tour. Yep, that bus that we keep on driving around. So if you're in Fort Lauderdale, Tampa, Orlando, Atlanta, and this includes, and I'll reach out to some of you guys. I know there's a lot of vendors in Tampa and the other areas in Florida. This is the last one of the year. So we're just going to kind of open it up a little bit and maybe bring it all together. Some well wishes to Kelly Green from AVIT. He was supposed to be hosting us in Tampa area, and he got injured at IT Nation and might be, kind of recuperating for what seems like several months. So if you know Kelly, shoot him a quick text or send him a message online. Wish him well, because great guy, by the way. And we'll find a new spot for that Tampa location on November 29th in the meantime. So hopefully when we come to Florida and Atlanta, we'll be able to kind of close out the year and just kind of enjoy some networking time before we get into holiday season, and then obviously the year will close. There's Keith Nelson. I see you, buddy. It was nice seeing you in person. I know I didn't catch you over at Oli's place, but you definitely had the cigar game down over there in Florida.
Oh, that's what I do. And first of all, I'd like to say this is probably the most prestigious guest you've ever had. Someone I honestly, truly have respected for many years. I think 30 on some years. I think one of the MSP greats, and who has developed some really great people in the channel. I look forward to seeing him. I think it's tomorrow. I'm bringing Ryan with to Oli's 40th anniversary, if he doesn't mind my son coming along. And really, I think people should connect with Oli if you want to learn the business and you want to learn how to do it right and do it with class and do it with dignity. So he's one of the guys I respect the most in the channel. As far as MSPs. And George, again, your party was epic. You came through. We had cigars. I was worried. You know how I get. There was plenty of cigars and a great time and a great venue. And the way you guys scrambled with inside, outside, weather, no weather, where it's going to be was truly amazing.
I appreciate that, Keith. It was definitely probably the most stressful sort of circumstances in a 24-hour period than I can remember ever doing anything in. But hey, we figured it out. We worked until we got to the end game. I think it turned out really well, given even forget the circumstances. Even if there was no rain or hurricane and force winds in the forecast, I think it turned out really well. just happy that we're able to get that off, and cool experience for the community. And hopefully we'll be doing that, that kind of thing going into 2023, right? Still
And let me clear the elephant in the room, and we'll just get out of the way.
Sure.
Your Eagles are still the best team in the division. You just played a team that was highly motivated. Ron Rivera's a respectable man. They had a great game plan. You guys didn't look 100% motivated as you usually come out. You seem to have lost a little swagger, but you surely don't have the problems in coaching and personnel that I'm experiencing right now.
Oof, wow, you're Dallas Cowboys, the America's team. Yeah, I appreciate that, Keith. I mean, obviously, I would, history would say 17-0 doesn't bode well for you getting and winning the Super Bowl. That would be my end game. I would think anybody a sports fan wants to win their championship. So if we had to drop a game, I'd rather drop it now when it wasn't the most important than down the line. So hey, that's not me apologizing for anything. I think my team needed to show up instead of their 10-day layoff there in between games and play the game. They get paid millions of dollars to do that, but I digress. Our special guest today, Oli from Alvaka Networks over in Orange County area there in the Los Angeles area. Oli, thank you very much for hosting us again on the Channel Strong Tour. All things considered, I think everybody loved like the race car things that was going on between Pete's ride and between your stuff. I mean, I felt like we were at the track apparently.
Yeah, well, race cars are what I do when I'm not doing MSP and cybersecurity stuff.
Yeah, everybody has to have their thing, right? Like,
Yep.
So maybe Keith's thing's the Cowboys, my thing's the Eagles. You like to race cars.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think that was a treat for the people in your area, and thanks for hosting us and bringing that together. So let's just zoom out, right? If I were to say on November 15th, 22, what's your feeling on the state of like the general economy, right? Do you think are you concerned, or are things, business as usual?
No, it's actually a topic I think about a lot. I don't think we've seen the rough patch that is coming yet. We've had a couple down quarters, but I don't know that the people on this call and perhaps their customers have not really felt the full brunt of it yet. I kind of liken the economy, the slowdown, the 2 quarters of slowdown to like a train. There's always some slack in between the connections on a long train, and the engine slowed down at the front, but we're all sitting in the caboose at the back, and we haven't taken up all that slack in those joints. So the caboose hasn't slowed down yet. And so that's kind of my metaphor. And there is oversupply in certain segments of the supply chain. And when everybody went from just in time to just in case ordering, and that has to be worked out. So some companies are slowing down production. We already see companies doing hiring freezes or doing layoffs, and that's all taking slack out of those joints, those connections in the rail cars. And eventually that's going to lead to a slowdown that's going to be more painful. And I think that we're going to feel, but I'm not going to go out on a limb and say how long it's going to last, or how deep it's going to go, or how much it's going to affect the IT community. Recessions are a funny thing. You have to kind of wait till they happen to find out how long it is, how deep it goes, and how much it affects your market segment or your clients. I will share that in my past experience, because I've been at this a long time, is that for me, I'm expecting some of my clients to come to me and ask for a 10 or 15% reduction in monthly spend as they get an order down from on high to cut costs. I don't think any will cancel. Some will stay the same, and there's a few that will do their own layoffs, and including some in the IT department, and they're going to try and go out. We need more help from you guys. So some of our reduction in business will probably get offset by some increases, but what exactly happens, I'll tell you in 24 months.
Of course.
I could tell you just on the supply side, the ports had the first decline in shipments last month in 3 years.
Wow.
Most people didn't realize that during COVID, that we were actually increasing every month. Part of it's due to some oversupply, as Oli pointed out. Part of it's due they're in contract negotiation, and the government decides to play games with labor and move some shipments to the coast, to the Gulf Coast, which backfired completely on them. And if you're in California or the West Coast, you'll notice you can't get salads or lettuce at restaurants because that all rotted on the ships trying to get around the weather, and which is the reason they don't ship to the coast, quite frankly. The weather's too unpredictable, and 1 to 2 day delays and offloading causes spoilage. And so I, just because of the prejudice in my business, I use the port as my bear weather, and we're looking at 8 to 9 months of some correction in inventory, of some slowdown.
I wonder how many people, since you're bringing this up, Keith, I wonder how many people tried to find reroute, change where they originate their stuff, or figure out different ways to move stuff around, simply because that port backup was pretty prolonged, right? I mean, with ships just pull in for whatever reason, and that probably, I'm sure somebody was like, well, maybe we go a different direction. I don't know.
Well, you have logistical problems, whether who can handle super tankers, dredging ports, labor. It's not just like you can call Volt Employment Services and say, send me a crane operator. And then you have infrastructure, and we like to think the West Coast ports are the best, the most efficient, and have the best dispatch system, but that's us. We're prejudiced.
I get that. I feel you. Oli, so you said some customers may come and ask you for a reduction in costs, which at some point the conversation is, well, what do you want to remove, right? In order to bring that cost down, but a lot of the industry, let's call them talking heads, still forecasting a very strong cybersecurity investments and spend, even going into 23, 24. So despite the economy maybe taking a little bit of a hit and people trying to reserve, it sounds like that problem continues to be, ultra fortified in terms of where the money's going. So that's probably not the thing that you cross off on, hey, let's take this out of the invoice, right?
Yeah, it's hard to know exactly what they're going to do. I can tell you from past experience, some clients are going to come and they're going to want the whole invoice just cut 10 or 15%. And there might be the rare one that goes gutsy for 20%. And they just want a flat reduction across the board. Others, most of them usually just want to tighten up on their device counts and whatnot, and they want to get rid of stuff. I mean, we do a pretty good job of inventorying what is active and in use at the client sites, but they get really, they get their sharp pencil out, and they start looking at, what do I need to cover and what do I not, and what's not here, what's getting decommissioned. And most of them will go that route. And then if they have some stuff being monitored and managed that they don't, view as vitally critical to the company, and they still need to get more dollars, they'll just say, hey, just take those off. And, they'll defer maintenance and kick that can down the road, just like you can make adjustments to allowance for bad debt and depreciation, to make your books look better, that you can kind of take IT and defer your maintenance and kick it down the road and spend the money later. And I think that's probably the number one complaint with a lot of MSPs, is that clients frequently defer maintenance on stuff, right? That's why some sorry shape.
That's always the chicken or the egg, right? It's like, hey, I need my stuff to work. Well, hey, you need to be proactive and make sure that it doesn't, your 250,000 mile engine isn't still on the road. And then you get into the periods and people are like, hey, fix it and repair it. Don't replace it, right?
Yep, exactly right.
Yeah. So how do you, are you, coming back to the concept of what your customers going to ask you for, so they're going to lay people off, right? Do you have a certain setup in your agreements or terms of service that say, hey, here's the minimum number of people that, have to be included in your agreement? You can't just take it down to one kind of thing, or do you just flex all the way down?
Yeah, we have a couple of agreements that say that, but generally we don't do that. We try to remain really flexible with the clients. And I know a bunch of years ago, it was, common practice, or it was accepted common best practice, that you would lock your clients into 3 or 5 year agreements. We're generally not doing that. There's a couple services that require some substantial investment on our part where we do lock them in for 3 years. But generally, and if you're looking to do an equity event or sell your company, it was considered best practice that you'd lock your clients in. But as it turns out, the buyers are looking at what your churn rate is on your clients. There's a general belief that if it's a good running operation, the average lifespan, life cycle for an MSP client is 7 years anyway. They don't, and I'm getting ready for an equity event on part of my company. And, so I'm really well tuned into this. I've been, talking to private equity, talking to investment bankers for the last 2 years, talking to potential buyers, not in any active discussions, but, feeling out the market. So I don't think that the 15, 20 year ago belief that you had to lock people into 3 to 5 year agreements as essential is not so essential today, in my opinion. So we're not doing it, and we're giving the clients maximum flexibility. I would love to have them locked into 10-year agreements, but that's a contractual friction when you're negotiating with them that we choose to avoid. I'd be curious what others are doing and thinking on this call.
Yeah, Keith, go ahead.
Our model's a little bit different because we have some amortization of development fees that can't be reduced. However, it's a long conversation. I would generally say Oli's operations a bit more mature than mine is, but in mine it's more of a one-on-one. There's a balance between, if I take some things offline, what's the cost to bring them back online?
Yeah.
And so it's, I don't have an exact formula maybe, but it's, I was just at a manufacturing company and it says, well, they do some aerospace engineering. They want to take some CNCs and some major machines offline. I go, look at your startup. And then we got to remove these from inventory as reporting to Skunk Works. And as it works out, that wasn't the way we could go.
Yeah, and Keith makes a good point. He has a substantial investment in software with his clients. So he's in a bit of a different model than most of the people on this call.
100%. So that's interesting. So you're in the middle of talking with the, I call them the bean counters out there in the world. I mean, so one would argue that, as all things go, the venture guys and how they generate their funds, the market and interest rate on the market would surely affect how they view and do business. So are they, I would say maybe the conversation you had in 2019 probably doesn't sound the same way in 2022, just based on the fact that, the interest rate is 7% now.
Yeah, no, the window closed in the last couple months on the double-digit EBITDA multiples, in my opinion. There might be still some companies out there getting those, but that window has, I think, largely closed and is in the process of closing. You better have a really, really interesting story. I think it's going to move back more to the traditional 7 or 8 times EBITDA for a solidly run company. But I know of one in the hosting space that did an 18 EBITDA a couple months ago. Another MSP highly respected in my area, a double-digit EBITDA, and then I know somebody else that did a 13. But these were all done a few months ago, and I don't think. And if you're just getting in, we were looking at doing our equity event about a year from now, but I'm not planning on doing it from a year from now because that's not going to be the right time to do it. At least that's what I'm forecasting.
Interesting. Okay, fair enough. So you think if somebody's in your...
Go ahead and answer your question, but there's something else I wanted to share.
Sure, go ahead.
So on the economy, the other problem MSPs and IT service providers are having is hiring and retaining staff. And we're in an inflationary market. So we have, technical people. Those are the hardest ones to hire working for us. And, every month that passes by in an 8% inflationary market, it's getting harder for them to, buy school clothes for the kids and books and to go to the grocery store to buy gas, to, make the car payment and insurance and what have you. And house payments. Hopefully, nobody has a variable rate on their home loan, which would be really ugly right now. But so these people that are, the service delivery people that work for us that touch our customers, that are so vital, the most vital people in our companies, they're starting to undergo a lot of financial duress. And IT service providers and MSPs generally aren't the most proactive in doing annual reviews and giving pay raises, but the dynamic has changed in the last year or two. And, the people working for us are extremely loyal, but the loyalty can only go so far. And you know what, the bosses, the owners are loyal back in a lot of different ways, maybe not always monetarily, but in other ways as well. But there just comes a time where your prized engineer is really stressed out. And so he starts looking at the job ads. And if he's making 80 or 90K, that's going to be low for some markets and maybe high for some others. But they start looking around and they find out that they can get a job for 120K or 140K. Hang on a sec. I'll look at it.
All good.
There must be people eaters outside or something. So at any rate, all of a sudden he goes out and he finds out, wow, I can make another 40K. And I keep in mind, I mean, some of the people are key people working for the people on this call. Your key guy, in some cases going to be able to go out and make 30 or 40K more. And that's a game changer when you're talking about 3-4K more per month in take home, and or at least maybe 3K. So what happens is he's got to take the job and he accepts it and he comes and tells you, and maybe you talk to him and you work out a deal and you can pay him more. But in a lot of cases, I think a lot of IT service providers think, I can't pay that much, or I'm not going to pay that much. I like the guy, he's loyal, but I just can't pay that much. So you part ways, and then the IT service provider goes to look to hire somebody new. And with their first job ads at the old rate, they're finding out they're not getting any response rates, or the people aren't qualified. So now you're a couple months into this, you're down short one key person. And that key person probably also fixes problems created by some of the lesser experienced techs. So that person's pretty vital. And customers are getting disgruntled, and you're telling them, well, look, I'm looking to hire somebody, be patient. And they are. And eventually you find out that, hey, I can't hire the same skill for what I was paying that guy. And now you got to go raise your rate and hire somebody. And that's what some do. But what I've seen a lot of my friends and peers do is they're losing 3 or 4 months as they learn that process. Their service levels are dropping down. And when they finally do hire, they haven't raised their rate because they're under profit pressure. They've settled to get the best person they can for the rate they were paying the guy. And that person turns out to be about the same skill as the other people on staff, just making more money. And he screws stuff up as much as the other guys, and there's no one there to fix it. And now the customers really start losing faith and anyway, my whole point is you're going to start a downhill spiral in your customer retention and your customer satisfaction rates if you get yourself caught into that. And then there's going to be other MSPs and IT service providers that are doing 8% rate increases or whatever. We're doing our second one in a couple months here, second one in about 15 months. And that's so that we can continue to pay our engineers the competitive wage and retain them, and which is a hard job. And I think we're going to get a bifurcation in the market. And I've seen this in past recessions. Except we didn't have a recession in the last one. This one's going to be more bifurcated in that the companies that can charge more and raise their rates and retain their good people, the customers will suck up the increased cost and stay with those companies, and probably complain and grumble a bit, but they'll stay. And there's going to be another segment of the market that loses. And we're going to get that bifurcation where some start a death spiral going down, and others will be picking up that business and growing. So recessions are always opportunities for change. And it's actually needed change in the market. So you have to kind of decide, if you're trying to decide how to deal with the recession, you got to decide how you're going to deal with it. And because of inflation and salary inflation in this market, you got to decide how you're going to deal with your rate structure and your pay to your staff. So anyway, that's my monologue, and I tell that to anybody that'll listen, because I believe so strongly that that's what's happening right now.
It's very interesting because like history does repeat itself to some degree. What about all the internal IT staff that are getting cut from the larger orgs? Those people, some of them start MSPs, right?
Right.
Because they aren't finding their jobs available out on the market. There seems to be I mean, they're not, yes, I would argue that they're not interchangeable all the time, right? Internal corporate IT people moving into MSP services where they're dealing with multiple end customers rather than one end customer effectively. Sometimes they don't transfer well.
Well, I can tell you right now that as a general rule, 95% of the cases, the best and the brightest are not the ones that are getting cut from companies, whether it's an MSP or an end user company. Those people, everybody knows who solves problems, and those people are protected and catered to like they're, treasures, because they are. So the people that are coming out on the market are, as a general rule, probably the second tier people, and they're not going to be your best and brightest problem solvers. That's not an absolute, so I don't want to insult anybody, but I think that's generally what happens. I think every organization ranks and stacks their people and decides who are we going to let go and why, and they're going to keep the top performers and the highest value people. And so and you're right, there will be some good people, ambitious people, entrepreneurial people let go that will start their own companies. So those are the new people coming in that are going to create extra pain in the marketplace for everybody. Usually their overhead is really low, and they don't even know how to price for proper overhead. So they're generally going to underprice, and they become that wild card that creates a little bit of pain and uncertainty and in outcomes with clients when they make decisions. But just remember, I have a saying that it takes dynamite to separate a client from their incumbent service provider. Even when they're unhappy, it takes a lot of time and a lot of really determination on the client to split. They will stick with the devil they know. I actually had somebody tell me that one time when they were on the second time around with them, when they didn't actually leave their incumbent service provider who they were unhappy with. And they said, well, we just decided to stay with the devil we know. And that's when I realized that we also totally failed to differentiate ourselves as Alvaka from that other company. And, really, they just thought things were going to be the same with a different devil with us. And so that was clearly a sales failure, a differentiation failure on our part.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that goes back to the whole good old, hey, what do I need help with? And I think for the better part of 20 years, it's been sales and marketing help. That was one of the things, I had a quick conversation with a couple of people down in Florida last week, and they're like, hey, we're bullish, right? We think 2023, 2024 recession proof, right? There's all this technology that's going to be sold. And I'm like, you're hoping that the IT services MSP can overcome sales objections and can get deeper into that dialogue, or else that, the check signers who's like, I'm just going to wait before I spend this money, just doesn't do anything, right? Like, so it requires a little bit of extra, encouragement, or, a little bit of sales effort or technique. And unfortunately, I think that, that may not be the strongest skill set of most of the people doing sales.
When the decision makers at our client sites, and I'm sure our clients aren't any different than anybody else in this call, when they're uncertain about the future, they do what I call sit on their wallet. They just don't spend. I mean, it might be a lot of pain, but they will defer spending because the cash is more important to have through the recession than a faster PC or a faster internet connection, or whatever it might be, or just a new piece of software or whatever. So they will sit on their wallet, and again, they will kick the can down the road and defer maintenance or defer that investment.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you say that. And then, like at the end of the day, back to your kind of, paint this picture, right? Your top guy and all this, whatever. But like, Oli, I don't know what the conversation is on the flip side, right? Hey, you got this 40,000K higher offer. Like, what does that conversation look like? I know in software companies that are in early stage, you're like, hey, we're gonna do employee equity and all this, whatever. And there's this, this rainbow at the end of that, or golden parachute at the end of that rainbow. But not so easy to do that in IT services, managed services land. So like, what do you do other than give them more money to retain them, right?
Yeah, pay is not everything. their overall satisfaction with their job and the work environment is really, really important. But that's easier to say, and that's more true in a market when we have 2.5% annual inflation. When it turns into 8.2 and 8.8% and 7.7, I think was last month, yeah, it's a big problem, and that's a game changer. That's the game changer, right? And then, we also are coming out of a market where there was a lot of stimulus money sent out to individual taxpayers and consumers. Companies got PPP loan forgiveness, and there was EIDL loans, and there was forgiveness on SBA property loans, business loans, and all kinds of crazy stuff. And then even more money coming in. And so, we've had, a couple $1 trillion, whatever it is, injected into the economy. And then the game changer of COVID, with everybody going to work from home, that caused a bubble in spending. And now there's not that free money coming back around anymore. And we're on the shadow side, or the tail end of that spending that a lot of companies did. So we might be into a spending shadow. And I'll liken it to Y2K. Remember when everybody was so scared about Y2K? George, you were probably like 8 years old or something at the time.
Of course, yeah.
But
Still learning how to type.
Yeah, but I was there for that, and companies were panicking about Y2K. So they were upgrading PCs, upgrading software, upgrading routers and switches, and looking at everything. And and of course the economy was super strong then. And then, so Y2K, December 31st, 1999 came, and January 1st, 2000 came, and wow, we were still alive and we still had power and everything else, right? And so about 2 weeks into January, I'm always used to the first couple of weeks of the year being like the first week to 10 days being really quiet. But then it was like January 15th, I go, wow, it's really quiet around here. The phones aren't ringing, nothing is going on. And it's the beginning of the year. And then we got to the end of January, and it's like, wow, things are still really quiet, and our revenue is way off for January. And then we rolled into February, and by February 15th, I'm going, wow, the phones still aren't ringing. And I was starting to panic, and I thought, if I'm going to make adjustments, spend adjustments by the end of February, if it doesn't change, which I did. And at the same time, I'm getting, this was when postal mail was still a thing. And every Monday, Tuesday, I'd walk out and get a stack of mail this tall. And included in that was Fast Company, the magazine Fast Company, Forbes, and Computer Reseller News. And everybody's talking about the stock market was hot, and you'd be seeing on the front pages about these companies still rocking and rolling and growing revenues. And I'm thinking, wow, Oli, you suck, right? Look at these guys. These guys are rocking and rolling, and I'm like 30% off on my revenue. But I made the cuts anyway because I was smart, and I'd been burned in the past from not doing that. Well, it was about around, I think, the end of June or July that Cisco finally, the darling company on forecasting revenues, who was teaching big ass Fortune 50 companies how to do revenue forecasting, all of a sudden revised their financials and their forecasts going forward. And that was the shot that tanked the stock market in Y2K. It was already frayed around the edges, but that was the official shot. And anyway, my point is that there was a ton of money spent on Y2K leading up to December 31st, and people didn't need anything in 2000. Their PCs were all new, the servers were new, routers and switches were all new, the software was updated, everything was pretty much perfect. And that's what led to Y2K, and I think that hurt a lot of resellers and IT service providers back then. So my point is we had a more mild version of that with COVID.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. I think that money's largely now, been exhausted, right?
Yep.
I mean, nobody's getting new stuff at this point. And I think a lot of people use those funds, to maintain, right, staff and payroll and what have you. So I think that there's nothing stopping people from getting cut this time, right?
yeah.
I still think that the head count, I mean, forget our size for a second. I mean, major companies are still announcing double-digit percentage layoffs, like in the last 2 weeks.
Yep.
So like, it's still happening, right?
Yeah.
And if it's happening up there, those are the same companies that, like, imagine you were competing to hire someone, and Microsoft was giving them an offer and you were giving them an offer. Probably Microsoft's going to outbid you, right, on that person. But now these big companies are flooding all these technical positions back into the market too.
Huh?
Yeah, well,
Go
there's
ahead, Pete.
another thing occurring.
it's like-
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear him talk.
It's like nothing when I broke it down.
Pete,
It's
you
not
talking
like-
to us? Or you talking to somebody else?
Oh, forgot I wasn't on mute. Sorry,
Okay.
guys.
I think there's another thing occurring, and we're seeing that in some of the job numbers we use to develop curriculum. The skill sets are off, and I think there's a surplus of people that are maybe standard IT guy. You know, there's no such thing as an IT guy. A lot of companies haven't understood that yet. And so the advantage to companies that are mature is it doesn't scale down. You can't have a help desk guy, a database guy, a systems guy, a security guy when you're scaling down. But you can have an MSP that provides all those services and understands business process. So I think that's where the advantage is. I think if you're just selling the normal bag of tricks, you may be having a little bit of trouble. Now, what we're seeing in the cycling of market is guys are getting hired and their value was really the company they came from and not their personal skills. And there's some short-termers who got huge raises that are going back to the original point and saying, is there still room for me here?
Grass is always greener syndrome.
And then I'll use Alvaka as an example because they're well known. And you come from Alvaka and the assumption is you're a security guy, right? But maybe at Alvaka you were just a help desk guy. And all of a sudden you get to a new company and they say, would you implement this for us? And they're going, no. And we're seeing that. We're seeing that transition back a lot.
Yeah, Keith, you raise a really good point. We're doing hiring, and in the security space, we're looking for two categories. One we call the compute stack. Those are the guys that work on servers and apps and Active Directory and all that kind of stuff. And then there's the network stack guys, the guys that are segmenting networks and doing firewall configs and rule sets and all that kind of stuff. And they're all hard to hire, but we're having an easier time hiring the compute stack guys. The network stack guys are really, really a tough hire. And then I want to make another point too. Be careful when you're hiring that we've in the past, we don't do it as much anymore, but we've made some hires where the person looked really good and we really liked them, but we just didn't go deep enough into their technical abilities. And it turns out they just weren't really able to get the work done after we hired them. And unfortunately, we had to part ways because of that. And Rex Frank, a lot of people know Rex Frank. He cut his teeth at Alvaka Networks, and he's one of our proud proteges out of the company. But I remember he was doing it when he was a service manager for us. I remember he did an interview, and it was a great resume. We all had high hopes for it. He walks into my office, drops the resume on my desk, and he slides it towards me. He goes, I don't know who I just interviewed, but it wasn't this guy. The guy came from a notable company, so the company he came from had reputation and the resume looked great, but all the things he was claiming on the resume was probably work done by other people at the company because he was not able to answer the technical questions in the interview for what he professed he accomplished. He was probably simply on a team that did those things, and he was probably not in a critical role. So yeah, interviewing is one heck of an art.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, you would love to get, some firsthand knowledge on someone, right? Like it's been, I'm sure it's difficult to get somebody to actually have a hands-on interview, right? Hey, come in for a day and let's see what, let's throw some things at you. Like, you can see what we do, we see what you do, but I feel like a lot of hiring and interviewing is done this way. And you just don't get that, you don't get that time with these people, right?
Yeah. It's an art to get to be a good interviewer and hire.
Yeah. And to your point, I've seen it happen time. To your point, they hire off the company's, history, right? So, all of a sudden they were on a team and they may have not been the heavy hitter on that team, right? They were just, on the team, right? And hey, look at all the things we accomplished in this group. And it's like, but what can you do?
Right, exactly right.
Yeah, 100%.
It's a the guy who's on a team and performs well is a valuable asset, and his skills may be less technical and more customer facing, and you go, there he was a fit. Over here, when he goes now to a non-MSP, to a direct company, now he's got to be the jack of all trades.
Yeah.
And I think that's where they fall. And so I was reverting back to George's question is, what do you tell them when they come up and say, I was offered 40,000? You're going, and you'll be the first one that's going to be let go because you're the most expensive. And remember that. And I've seen that a lot. You know, the guys are coming back and saying, I can't do what you were doing.
Well, when the belt has to tighten and decision makers have to actually shrink down teams, usually the newest people are the people that go first, right? I mean, let's be, first in, first out. I hate to say that, but usually the people that have been around, back to that, what Oli was saying about loyalty, right? I mean, that's the part where, you try and keep the people that have spent the time with you. Pete, you raise your hand. Just go for it, my friend.
Yeah, so let's turn the tide here. And Oli, good lessons from Babson College, if I remember correct, between you and I.
Yeah.
Oli and I go way back to some of the early days of iPad, and probably met just before that when dinosaurs, and Keith was.
You're aging
Keith
yourself, Pete.
and Oli and I.
Dinosaurs.
Yeah, I know. But
Yeah.
we saw Y2K, we saw that big run up, and then we saw it go flat and even depress, right? So right now we're talking about labor coming in at high dollars, right? What happens when we get to the other side of that now, and we've all got these pricing pressures of people have gotten used to getting those cuts, and now we need to do those rate increases in order to maintain that staff? What are the MSPs going to face on that side? Because there may be a labor pool that is willing to come back into the workforce at a lower rate, right? So what happens then? How does that shift happen?
Yeah, you know what? I don't have that figured out. Generally, once they go up, the rates stay up, but you're right. I mean, if the recession's bad enough, there's going to be a glut of people coming on the market, and they'll take a rate. They will take a job 30K below what we're paying the hires that we're making now. And I view our second rate increase in 15 months, both of them are 8%, and the next one is slated for February 1st. And I figure if things get really ugly in the economy, and it's never been as ugly as I'm going to hypothesize right now, but if it gets really ugly, I figure that second 8% rate increase gives us a higher elevation point from which to negotiate back from, rather than not doing a rate increase at all and then getting them coming to us and saying, let's renegotiate. I've not seen that happen yet in the IT business, but I know it's going to come one of these days, where our segment gets hit so hard for whatever reason. I know it's hard to, we've all lived in prosperity and growing revenues for so long. It's hard to imagine, but this is a very mature market now. And, there aren't new clients getting created every day that are growing. There was a time when I was just talking to somebody back in the 90s. I was installing new networks. Every month I was installing new networks to companies that didn't have a PC network. And, but you know what? You don't do that very often. How often do we install brand new networks? I mean, we might grow networks a little bit. We downsize them sometimes too. But yeah, this is not a growing market. It's a mature market. And, we're not looking at 20 and 30% year over year increases in most market segments. Maybe cybersecurity is the exception to that right now. But yeah, so yeah, that's a tough, you nailed it, Pete. That's a tough one. And we all got to figure that out when it happens to us.
Yeah, it's a preparation thing, right?
Yeah.
So I heard you mention a couple rate increases that you've gone through, and it's something that a lot of MSPs struggle with, right? How do we approach our clients? What advice would you have that would give some people some thought processes on how they approach their client base? Because they're afraid that they're going to lose the client if they do that.
So we did our last rate increase about a year ago, 8%, which is pretty substantial. And that was pretty much across the board. And we pulled our customer list, and our account managers went out and talked to those clients and warned them, advised them that there was a rate increase coming, and they talked to them and explained why. Then we sent out a letter that talked about how we were, having cost increases all across the board, from payroll to insurance to fuel to shipping to everything, and that we needed to raise our rates. And then we sat back and waited to see what happened. What would the fallout be from the clients? And we waited, and we waited, and we waited, and then we waited more, and we're still waiting. You know what? We didn't lose a single client. We didn't even get a single complaint. These resistances to raising our rates are really manifested in our own head. I think clients are expecting rate increases right now. It's a problem if your service levels are in your SLAs with their clients aren't doing very well and they're not real happy with you. It's going to be really hard to raise your rates. But if you're hitting your SLAs and you're taking good care of them and they're happy and things are running smoothly, they're not going to bat an eye, in my opinion.
Yeah, Oli, don't you think with like all the different price increases and stuff like that, for heaven's sakes, there's a hamburger stand down the street from me. I've got used to them costing like $4.65 for a hamburger, fries, and a soda. It's $13 now.
Yeah, I got a sandwich yesterday. When I looked at the sandwich shop, it was $12.
Yeah.
Shocked.
You guys got to stop getting all those toppings that they're charging $1 per topping.
Yeah.
No, that was just for the bread.
No, you're right, Brent. You're in the same region as us here. It's just outrageous. I mean, and I took one of our new hires to lunch last week to the same sandwich shop, and it was $37 for the two of us between drinks and sandwiches, and we didn't even get the chips.
Lisa, go ahead.
I was just going to say, just, collaborate what Oli said. We had hosted guest, and we had Peter Kajawa with Service Leadership talk, and he said the exact same thing, Oli. He was like, you guys need to raise your rates at this time. And he goes, we've talked with numerous partners that have done that, and they haven't had, any real pushback from it. If they've lost a client, it's probably a client they didn't want anyway. So,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I hope everybody who's there's going to be a lot of people listening to this after the fact. Sounds like you need to be raising your rates right now. And it sounds counterintuitive because, if everybody thinks the market's going down, will your customer, be willing to absorb a rate increase? But I'm hearing, yes, they will. So.
Well, you get into a whole theoretical thing where I'm kind of the odd man out, where people are always talking about these QBRs or TBRs or whatever they want to call it. And they're talking about how awesome they are with technology that no one cares about. And they're not talking about the business value they brought to the client. And once you can quantify that, your ability to raise rates is tied to what you've actually accomplished. When you go to a shop floor and say, we've gotten you your skunkworks approval, we've helped you get this new contract, we've increased your lean efficiency by 30%. We're no longer a line item, right? Yeah. We're a value. When you're just sitting there saying, oh, I blocked this something at your firewall, and the CFO is looking at you and goes, I don't even know what you're talking about, right? So sometimes we talk like we're superheroes and our client doesn't even know what you're addressing.
I love how the technical resources reporting to the CFO. Think about that for a second.
Yeah.
Well, we all want to go to the CFO. He's got the money.
Yeah.
Right.
That's our guy.
I got you.
Yeah. I remember having a talk with, and don't assume the CFO knows the return on investment or whatever that's going to come out of doing something. But I remember talking to one CFO, and I had to make the financial case for him on the ROI for him to understand why it was worth spending $12,000 a month with Alvaka. And once we made the financial case about what their operational costs were going to be, and the risks would be without us on that spend, the PO sailed right through. So don't assume that if you're talking to a CFO that they can crunch the numbers or know how to crunch the ROI. and they're busy. So, do it for them. And you know what the best part is? You say, hey, here's, I'll pretend, George, you're the CFO. I'll go, here's the analysis on the ROI. These are the numbers that I use. This is how I calculated it. And you show them and you go, George, do you agree? I mean, are these numbers, do you agree on this top line revenue number that I'm basing this on? Is that accurate? Oh yeah, that's accurate. Would you change anything? And you know what? If they say, well, yeah, change this number and change that one, that's perfect. That's wonderful. They're engaged. And now it's their numbers and they own them. It's actually kind of better if they make you tweak them a little bit, because now it's their numbers and they own it. So you got to make the ROI case if you really want to make the sale, to Keith's point.
And by the way, just another thing we try and do, when we go to the CFO's office, we like to bring someone with us that's sponsoring what we're putting in, sales, production. IT notoriously is just someone walking into the saying, I need new toys, my people are bored. But when sales says, I need this to bring more money in the company, or production says, I need this to get this specific contract, and you just sit there and ask questions of how you're going to implement it and the time frame, it helps.
No, I mean, having an internal sponsor of the effort, I'm sure makes a lot of difference.
Oh yeah.
Rather than you're the outside guy coming in, right? So not everybody has the luxury of that, by the way, right? Because usually the person bringing you in is also the decision maker and is also the check signer. So there is no inside person other than, unless you're working with an office manager or somebody running a division or a department, right? Who's like, hey, I sat down with these guys that came in, they saw the operation, they reviewed it, they're making these recommendations. I agree. Obviously you have to be of a certain size to get to that point now.
Yeah, if you're dealing with larger companies, definitely there are sponsors that you can pull in, to Keith's point, though. I think in the SMB with 10 user company, 10 employee company, yeah, that's probably a little bit harder to find the sponsor. They all sit in the same office anyway, right?
Virtually.
Yeah, true. Yeah,
Yeah.
now they sit in the same country, maybe.
Yes, exactly. I mean, in this last little segment, has anybody been able to augment what they're doing with, I'm not saying go, India or anything like that, but like maybe hiring outside of the area, region, state, or even country, right? To offset, maybe you don't need people, sitting next to you in the next cube, right? They can offset you from a different time zone.
Well, I see a trend going on. We're not in it by choice. But before I get into that, I want to give a shameless plug. Tomorrow at Pacific time, in California, if you're in Orange County, from 3 to 7, we have our 40th company anniversary tomorrow, a party from 3 to 7. We got a great program with some presentations. We got fantastic attendees coming. We expect about 100 people or so. And for those of you on the call, like Brent and some others that are local, I think Keith is already planning on coming. Come on down. But anyway, to answer your question about the trend, I see a big trend with I talk to a lot of people in the IT service space, the MSP space, and Philippines. Yeah, I see a lot of people taking their help desk to the Philippines and lowering their costs to about 30% of what US dollar costs are. And we've made a choice not to do that as a company at Alvaka. One of our 3 differentiators is the fact that we're all US staff 24 hours a day. So it's hard pressed to find a company in the US that is staffed 24 hours, not on call, not monitoring 24/7. At 2 a.m., this evening, if somebody were to call my company, there's no operator there, and they press 0 or press 1, they're going to get routed to the NOC. And one of our guys in the United States, in Orange County, is going to pick up the phone and say, Alvaka, how can I help you? And so that's a huge differentiator. And for people in the CMMC space and some security spaces, they find comfort in the fact that we have these background check, drug tested, all US based personnel. So that's a differentiator for us. And we've, I got to tell you, we got a lot of people on payroll and 6-digit incomes, and to be able to go get those same people for 25 or 30K in the Philippines, or even less in some cases, is quite attractive. But that would ruin one of our key market differentiators.
And by the way, Oli, I'll definitely be there if I don't get suckered into having to pay for Unar's food and drinks again.
Well,
I can't
think-
afford that anymore.
Yeah, I don't know if we got a hosted bar or what. I should find out about that. But we got a lot of beers in the fridge in the conference room.
Now, I could afford my own. It's just I can't afford Unar.
Well, didn't you just get a nice new upgrade on the car?
That's why I can't afford Unar.
Ah, there it is. There it is. And I believe everybody's driving Teslas with you, including your son, right?
Yes.
Exactly. Guys, this was a super, I mean, Oli, I really appreciate again for you jumping on. I mean, this is like diving into the mind of somebody behind, the desk, trying to figure out where to go. And like everybody's in a different stage and journey, right? In their IT services business. So this was super, nice to be able to zoom back from somebody that's, on the very mature side and understand how they see the world. Of course, Keith, always the commentary. We love that. And Pete, thank you on your 2 cents. And this session was recorded. I highly suggest once we post it to go back and rewind and listen. Some really good pieces in there. And frankly, better to learn from other people than go through the 2, 3, 4 month turn down, like Oli was saying, before you figure out what direction's up. And then, hey, it sounds like it's time to maybe raise your rates. So that's a probably key takeaway from this very session. For everyone else, again, this session will be available on mspinitiative.com under sessions. We'll be continuing to do these throughout the end of the year, Tuesdays, Thursdays, 1 o'clock Eastern time. And if you're in Florida or Atlanta, we're coming to you in a couple of weeks. We'll love to see you guys in person before the year closes out. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Oli, I'll try and send you a thank you gift there for joining us today. And everyone else, catch you on the flip side.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.